I'm certainly in no position to lecture the French on how to do food and drink. We have great food options here in Toronto, and we know how to do good bevies right too, but still, the French are among the best ever at knowing how to eat and imbibe. But what I'm about to promote can't be purchased over in that country. It sure can be in my home and native land, though, and Bev's home and native land, but also in the country that sits under us, the US of A, and it's Sparkplug Coffee. They put premium quality beans in that bag that they will deliver right to your door, if you do live in Canada or America. And if you're a Canucker, you don't pay for shipping. Sparkplug provides the best coffee you'll ever brew, and man, is it convenient and affordable. Why make a Starbucks run when this is in your cupboard? You'll certainly save money cup for cup compared to takeout. Log on to sparkplug.coffee/HYES and start looking for your new favorite. That HYES bit at the end there, that's our promo code, and using that, we'll get a one-time 20% discount. I forgot to promote their Autopilot Coffee Club. Pause or cancel if and when you might have to go that route. But whether you remember or not, just give sparkplug.coffee a try, mes amis. Okay, so that's the sponsor section. Time for the reviewing section. Bev, get that music going toot sweet.
And action! Have you ever seen
Rififi? Bonjour, lovers of the cinema, and merci for downloading the 658th edition of Have You Ever Seen? 658 podcasts now, Bev. Every Monday and every other Friday, we post spoiler-drenched reviews of terrific old films. And sometimes we go international, like we are today. I'm the Stéphanois who did a 5-year stretch in the Huskow and then joins in a robbery that, as cool as it is, could land me right back in prison, Ryan Ellis. And here's a lady who loves a wordless and especially musicless diamond theft sequence that takes up about a quarter of the entire film, my wife, Bev.
That's me.
Your first viewing of this movie, I know you liked it. I should probably warn everyone off the top, as I usually do when we cover movies made in foreign countries, that we're probably going to bung up the pronunciation of a lot of these French names, but we'll try our best to get them right. This happened to me recently with Old Boy, only a week and a half ago. I'm sure I was wrong many times over. Okay, the coming attractions opinion question. Rififi is one of the great heist movies. Others include Mission Impossible. I guess a lot of Mission Impossible movies, but especially that first one in 96. Ocean's 11. I think the remake more than the original, but both of them, I guess. The Score and Top Copy. That was directed by Jules Dassin also, who directed this. There are plenty of other options, of course, and then there's Rififi. So what's your favorite heist scene in movie history?
I went back on YouTube and watched a bunch of famous heist scenes to try and have a really informed answer and to come up with an answer that wasn't just the movie that we just watched. But all of these famous heist scenes proved to me that maybe no one's bested Rififi. But just to add some color, I'm going to say my favorite heist scene is the shortstop stick-up in Raising Arizona.
Oh,
I'll take the Huggies.
Yeah, okay. You said shortstop, I'm picturing a baseball player. What?
Well, there's 2 heist scenes in that movie, and they're both absolutely classic. There's when John Goodman and the other guy stick up the bank. Mm-hmm. But my favorite is Nicolas Cage with a panty on his head. Yeah. Taking the Huggies and whatever you got in the register.
Fair enough. I love Mission Impossible, which clearly paid homage to this, including the fact you can't make noise on the floor. He couldn't step on the floor at all in that movie, but still. And Ocean's 11 is probably the most fun one I can think of when it comes to heists. But I think I'll go with the movie of today, Rififi, partly because it inspired so many other movies, and it is fascinating. A full half hour. I didn't know it was that long until I did the research. I always do research before, but I did even more afterwards, and it says it's basically 30 minutes of a 2-hour movie.
33 minutes.
It's even more than a quarter of the movie then in that
33 minutes, does that include the planning scene where they're in the basement? Yeah.
Maybe they do mean that. I think they mean when they actually kidnap the concierge to the point where they leave. I assume that's what people meant. I wasn't timing it, but in any case, we'll get to all that a little later on. First of all, let me set it up. Du Rififi chez les hommes, was the actual full title, was released in France 70 years and 1 day ago by Pathé on April 13th, 1955, although it didn't come over here to North America until June 1956. I'm not sure if it was a hit or not. Mid-50s box office, especially for foreign films, is hard to track. But I know that they made this on a pittance, and many of the people involved, including the director, Jules Dassin, were broke as hell when they made it. Starving artists sometimes produce incredible things. But Bev, the movie is a 70-year-old crime-soaked geezer. Remind us what this old man is about and give us the skinny, please, on that film noir called Rififi.
4 career criminals, Tony, Joe, Mario, and Cesar, work together and pull off a sophisticated jewelry heist. And they almost get away with it, too. But a local crime boss, Grutter?
I don't know.
Yeah,
Oh,
good question.
go with
Anyways,
that.
figures
Grutter.
out Grutter figures out it was them and wants the loot for himself. He scares Cesar, the safecracker, into squealing, kills Mario and his wife when they won't give up the goods, then kidnaps Joe's son to hold for ransom. Tony knows Grutter will never let Joe's son live, so he gets him back by force, but he's too late to save Joe, who caved and brought the ransom to save his son. Grutter kills Joe, but only wounds Tony, who kills Grutter, and gets Joe's son back to Paris before succumbing to his own wounds. The child's reunited with his mother, all the thieves are dead, and the cops get the money.
Or, in a nutshell, criminal godfather dies with beloved kid named Anthony, or Tonio, by his side. Just like in The Godfather, which we happened to watch a couple days ago. Because the kid's named Tonio in this. He's the godson of the main character, Tony.
Named after him.
And Anthony in The Godfather is the grandson that's playing with Marlon Brando when he dies. Couldn't come up with a very good nutshell, but I like that comparison, and just having seen Godfather as well, which, by the way, of course, obviously holds up. It does not insist upon itself. And it's also a gangster movie. You got the gangsters here with Grutter, whatever his name is, Grutter, and that obviously is all gangsters. Okay, Rotten Tomatoes numbers and such for this film are quite good. 92% of the critics like it, 49 fresh, only 4 rotten. The average is 8.3 out of 10, and 95% of audiences. Jules Dassin's highest rated movie is Thieves Highway. That's 100%, so nobody's disliked that. Brute Force and Top Copy are second, but I looked it up specifically for each film. The sample size is very low. I said, 53 reviews, but 49 fresh ones for Rififi. It's 20 and 10. 20, I think, for 2 of them and 10 for the other one. So it's a very small sample size compared to the 53 for this one. But still, they do slightly outrank this. This was nominated for the Palme d'Or at Cannes in 1955, while Jules Dassin won for Best Director at that same festival, and it also won some American awards, including from the New York Film Critics, but no Oscar nominations. Well, you'd never seen it before last week. I'm a big fan of this, my 3rd time seeing it. What are your thoughts on Rififi?
I want to know where this movie's been hiding all this time. I'm sure I had heard of it, but it deserves to be a bigger part of the conversation when you talk about the greatest film noirs, but maybe more accurately when you talk about heist films, because it's a masterpiece. It's the crown jewel of the film. It's otherwise a good movie, but that scene is really special.
The thing I remember the most from that whole sequence, and there's a lot of things to remember, but especially the umbrella thing, and apparently they got that from, their novelist got that from some actual robbery. Yeah. And then people tried to do this robbery in reality, especially in Mexico. I think they banned the film.
Yeah, it was banned in some countries because there were copycat crimes.
Or what do you call that, a tutorial?
Yeah.
This movie's a tutorial. But anyway, when they get through enough, they poke enough of a hole through to put the umbrella unopened, then they open it, they just actually lift it up so they can reach in and grab the stuff out. So they don't actually have to pull the umbrella back out of there until they've actually gotten through enough and made a big enough hole they can get down into. And they can't make noise because that would set off the alarm. A very Mission Impossible-esque type of thing there. Well, they make a little bit of noise, but very little. Cruise could not touch the floor at all. Look at the whole sweat thing at the end of that sequence.
Such a good, I rewatched that. Of all the scenes I rewatched, that was definitely the one where I'm like, okay, this actually holds a candle to Rififi.
I think Top Copy, which was made 9 years later by Dassin, the idea there is they go from above. I'm not sure it's the same, you can't make sound in the, I think, art gallery in that. I don't remember that exactly. But you had to go from above just like this. And maybe that's part of what is so fascinating about this as well, is because, I don't know, maybe they dig too much and the roof starts to collapse or makes too much noise even when they're going quiet. There's a lot of risk going in from above. And of course, Cruise has to deal with the fact that Jean Reno nearly drops him.
Yeah.
In Mission Impossible.
Something that scene has that Rififi doesn't is score. And I think that Rififi proves that it was a smarter choice to go without.
And there's some dialogue, not much in that one. A little bit, because that sequence isn't as long. But these guys don't speak for about a half an hour, I guess, and no music for about a half an hour. The composer, what's his name again? Georges Auric. He apparently wanted to score it, so he did. And then Dassin said, all right, fine, go ahead and do that. They compared the two, and then it was Auric who said, no, you're right, no music on that.
Yeah, Dassin didn't want him to do it, but he was like, I'm going to do this just in case, to save you. Because not even necessarily that he thought you're making a mistake, but he thought that the studio boss, whoever's paying for it, would insist that they put score in it. So he had to do something to save him from that criticism.
I guess they didn't criticize it. Pathé didn't criticize it. Let's get into this right now about Dassin's history. He was one of the guys who was blacklisted for having communist leanings. And it sounds like he actually was. It wasn't one of those situations.
He was a member of the Communist Party, yeah.
Yeah, so it wasn't that he shouldn't have been ostracized. It's so stupid. Such a weak people. Maybe the Americans are weaker, and have always been, than they think they are, if we can't handle some filmmakers that have different viewpoints than they do. But anyway, he was blacklisted. He did Brute Force with Lancaster in the late 40s, The Naked City, Thieves Highway, that's really good, Night in the City, I believe that was 1950, then nothing for 5 years until this, and he was blacklisted that whole time. But he goes to France to make this movie. The only way he could make a movie was to go over to Europe, where they weren't going to blacklist him. Then he made Never on Sunday, and I think it's 1960, and Top Copy, and maybe a few other movies. But this was the peak, except his film noir stuff. Some people might like that even more than this, actually. Film noir in America stuff. This is noir, I guess, but the Naked Cities, the Thieves Highway films. And his only 2 Oscar nominations were for writing and directing Never on Sunday in 1960. I think he should have been nominated for every award you can imagine for this movie. I don't think 1955 was a great year for film in the first place, or 56, you could argue, because that's when this actually came out in America. That might have been a little better year, but this is a fantastic film. And then you got this subtext, which I guess is incredible that America would ever let it be shown in American theaters. Studios would let it be shown.
You say you didn't know if it was a hit or not.
Because the blacklist
wasn't
over
enough
yet.
of a hit in Europe
That it trended to go
that there
over
was
here.
pressure to show it in America. Everybody wanted to see it. He was, in a way, the first to break the blacklist, even if he didn't make the movie in Hollywood, because the movie showed in America.
That happened in the later 50s with Spartacus, when Kirk Douglas hired Dalton Trumbo, and Otto Preminger, I think, was the year before that on something.
Of course, we know Trumbo was writing under a pseudonym.
Oh, well, that whole time, yeah.
Yeah.
An Oscar was won for him. That should have been his Oscar, but he didn't actually, I think he eventually got. Anyway, so yeah, the blacklist thing, I always think was stupid. Their ideas. Stop being a weakling. Having
It's
communists
worse than
in the...
stupid. It's like...
Well, it's cruel as well.
No, I don't want to say it's an act of terrorism. It's always conservatives that think that they're the ones being censored, but this is a pure act of censorship that's meant to terrorize people who think differently than the powers that be.
I think that was
and the
bipartisan.
status quo.
That wasn't just Republicans back then.
Okay, I guess. I wasn't there, and I don't know all the ins and outs. Communists are your enemy now. They weren't when these people belonged to the Communist Party. That's irrelevant anyway, because communism is an idea, not a country. The compulsion to ruin people's lives because of an idea that they explored or even believed in. You want to talk about un-American. That's so deeply un-American. Mm-hmm. You say he didn't make a movie for 5 years. He tried, and HUAC reached into Europe and managed to stop them. He had a project going, and it was going to star Zsa Zsa Gabor. They pressured her into dropping out of the project. Mm. There was another one where they were going to shoot in Rome, and they got the Italian government to work for them to shut down every location that he wanted to shoot. Huh. They reached out to keep destroying him, stopping him from even working in Europe.
So as bad as that is, though, I think what bothers me more, though, too, is the notion of ratting on your friends. And those who didn't do that are the ones who were ostracized and blacklisted as much as if they were ever in the party themselves. And then he wouldn't do that. The sequence when Cesar, the character he's playing, and he wasn't supposed to play the character, he wasn't going to act in it. It was a Scorsese type thing with Taxi Driver. That wasn't going to be Marty's role, but the actor couldn't get there. I forget why. So Marty plays one of the best roles in all of Taxi Driver, the guy in the back seat saying he's going to kill his wife. Dassin wasn't supposed to play Cesar. That actor dropped out or something, visa problems, whatever it was. So he takes a fairly big role, much bigger than Marty's role in Taxi Driver. And then when he is the rat and gets shot by Tony for it, for breaking the rules, as they keep calling it, the rules, that's supposed to be a play on the fact that this is what happens to you. But he wasn't one of the rats.
Yeah, snitches get stitches.
I covered All the King's Men with Robert Rawson, who directed The Hustler as well. And he did rat on friends because he didn't have a career himself, and he thought, I want to just work, fine. I knew this person, that person, that person, that person was at this meeting. Maybe he said they were communists. I don't know if he did or not. But that bothers me even more, that you're not going to work if you don't rat out your friends. A lot of people would say, if we're going to go to war, I'd rather die than have my buddy die. Or I'd rather have my wife live and I die in a home invasion or something like that. Most people, I think, reasonably feel like they don't want other people to be hurt or killed if they could take that burden on themselves. And I'm asking this too, rat on yourself, which is bad enough, but also rat on your maybe good friend.
I can understand the instinct. And if you're in a panic and you're looking at the potential for your world to just get destroyed, for your career that you worked very hard for to get destroyed, and it would just be easy, I can empathize with that.
Kazan spoke
But I
out.
feel like we should maybe be thinking about this now that we're living in a time where it feels pretty realistic that something like this could happen again.
Yeah.
Let's think about what became of these people's legacy. Was it Elie Kazan?
Kazan, yeah.
Kazan.
He did talk.
I remember something in the Oscars years ago.
I've talked about this a few times, yeah.
Yeah, where there was
an honorary award.
Yeah.
Marty and De Niro actually
a lot of people
presented it.
sat through
Three
it.
people that stand out the most to me were always Nick Nolte, Ed Harris, and Amy Madigan. Madigan and Harris are married, and then Nolte was nominated that year for, and Harris was too, for Truman Shows. That's why Madigan was there with him. And then Nolte was nominated for Affliction. And they all sat there, and they were stone-faced as well.
Oh, yeah, arms crossed, didn't want any part of it. They're mad. We know what you did. We know what kind of person you are. You know, the people who were the victims, the Hollywood 10, their legacy is hurt. But your legacy, that's way worse. They're victims. They didn't deserve that. And then you could think, well, maybe Elie Kazan didn't deserve the career that he had then.
Now, these days, what we might see is, have you now or have you ever criticized the president of the United States?
And I guess, in fairness...
Because he's flawless, he's perfect.
The real enemy is not Elie Kazan. The real enemy is McCarthy, McCarthyism, and everybody who jumped on that bandwagon. I'm glad that we still hold it up as an example of one of the worst things America's ever done, even though you could say, well, what were the consequences if you people didn't get to make a few movies? Who cares? But the consequences were real enough that it still lives in people's imaginations as overreach of power and overreaction.
I get it more with the State Department, that whole thing that's in Manchurian Candidate, because that's a play on that, too. There's all these communists, and he keeps on changing the number.
Again, communism, not a country, an idea.
No, but people in the government, I understand that a little bit more. Still wrong to do what they did. But the Hollywood people, come on. You're not that weak, a country. Or maybe you are.
Yeah, if you're weak enough that a few movies can tear your whole country apart, I don't know what to tell you.
And then you get a subtle subtext, maybe not that subtle, in this movie anyway, and they didn't censor it. Also, don't we see either nudity or at least a sheer, is it maybe, what's her name again? Ida?
Ida. She's wearing a top
we see her nipples,
where you
right?
fully see her boobs. It's very sheer.
Maybe
There's
they cut
no
that
mistaking.
out.
There were edits in the American version,
Okay.
and apparently some of the edits really were from the heist scene. They didn't want to make it an instructional video of how to rob a jewelry store because it was too good. And yeah, they probably cut those boobs out too. But if they left the scene of Cesar, or they should leave the scene of Cesar getting killed, you gotta wonder what happened to him in the end. Although I guess it wouldn't hurt the movie that much to not know what happened to Cesar. But I don't know if they would have had the self-awareness to cut that scene out and understand that in a way it was about them.
They maybe didn't realize what he was going for because he is the rat, and in reality, he wasn't a rat. It was other people who were, so...
Well, he's playing a character, and that character was the rat. It's not even just that he gets killed by his buddy. It's that his buddy says, you know what happens to people who squeal when they break the rules, as he says. Cesar is like, I know, and he fully accepts his fate. He doesn't beg for his life. He just sits there, and he's bummed about it. But he knows that that is what Tony has to do.
Also, he's the one that wrecks everything. They would have got away with it, too, if it wasn't for that meddling Cesar and his ring. Giving the ring he stole, a separate part. It wasn't what they were going for. They wanted the diamonds in the safe. He steals that ring that he saw somebody else bring in there when he was scouting out the bank and saw the safe and everything. Grutter, whatever his name is, Grutter, figures out what's going on from that. If he didn't steal the ring, they would have been fine.
Yeah. You know there's trouble in that ring because they made a point of having a little moment with him stealing the ring, and you're like, oh no, that's going to be their downfall. And it was.
By the way, about the job, we had a fantastic dialogue-free sequence in Blood Simple last week, too. The whole bit when John Getz finds Dan Hedaya and deals with him. By the way, I cleared this up in the Well Actually section, but we wondered why John Getz gets out of the car. And I watched it. I found it on YouTube, a free print. It looked pretty good, too. He doesn't puke. I think he just hears Dan Hedaya in the back seat. He thinks he does, and when he sprints out there, oh my God, he's not dead.
Yeah.
And then when he comes back, guy's crawling on the street. But back to Rififi. When it opens, Tony is losing at cards. That's a good touch. This is a guy who is obviously smart and clever and has ice in his veins, but he's losing when it starts out. And then he ends up being a loser at the end in a way because he doesn't get the jewels because he's dead and his friend is dead. Luckily, the kid survived. And Louise is her name. She's obviously okay too, but almost everybody else involved, including Ida, Mario's wife, is dead. So the main four guys all get killed. And then what, two? Definitely, or is it maybe Mado? She does?
Maybe, no, Mado, I think she's okay.
She survives, okay. But she's also been the girlfriend of a mob boss. That may not be a good thing. He's dead too, though.
And both of his brothers.
Right, yeah. And the backstory of this is that Tony's 5-year stretch is him taking the rap for a job he did with Joe. So Joe owes him
another reference to the HUAC thing, where he's the good guy, even though they show him doing pretty bad things.
Well, he does smack around his girlfriend.
Smack around. He takes his belt off and beats the hell out of her.
You don't see it, but you hear it, and you know he did it.
Yeah, but he's the guy that didn't snitch. He's a good guy. I mean, it's 1955, so audiences would be like, yeah, so he beat his girlfriend, but she deserved it. But he doesn't snitch. He saves the kid in the end. He's the closest thing to a hero in this movie. And
his whole point is to save the kid. Well, he's trying to save Joe from giving the money over to Grutter, which I don't know how to pronounce his name. Whatever. But he goes there to get the kid back, and he does. And he does kill the bad guy in the process, but gets shot himself.
You could argue that part of the reason that he took the rap for whatever crime it was sent to prison is because of that kid as well. Takes the rap for Joe.
He has something to live for, and I don't.
Kid,
or more
he
to live
spent
for.
3 years in prison. That kid is 3 years old. Okay,
Those 5
I can
years
do the math.
he spent in prison.
Well, the age of the kid was the same as the number of years he was in prison.
And Tony says no to Mario's plan, so not even Joe's plan, but Mario's, to smash and grab. I believe that's what's in the subtitles, that phrase, smash and grab, at Mappin and Webb. And he wants to do it in broad daylight, but it's Tony's idea to go with the plan that they come up with. Even the explainer scene is pretty fascinating, but then they actually go through the whole job. The explainer scene is what you usually get in movies like this, and then maybe you don't get every little detail the way you do in this movie. And maybe the biggest key is what do you do about the alarm? But then he sprays foam into it, so it's actually going off, but it's not hitting the clanger thing in the back. So he does disable it after that.
These guys are professionals. They really know what they're doing, and they're smart, and they think about it. There's the idea sometimes think of criminals as oafs, behaving on instinct and not thinking things through. How fun is it to watch a great, smart heist
even if they're criminals,
take place and
it's
for
always
them
fun
to pull it off? Like I said, I was watching all these heist scenes on YouTube, and there is this version of a scene, the Mission Impossible, the Rififi, where they're very calculated and careful and good at what they do. And then there's the other kind, which is just Heat. Heat is probably the best example of this, and a lot of people love this scene, but their bank robbery scene, and they also rob, is it a Brinks truck?
Yeah, the opening sequence.
Both scenes, it's a lot of people yelling, "Get down! Shut up!" The whole driver of the whole scene is everybody yelling at everybody to get down and shut up. Yeah,
the great sound in the gunplay when they're in the street.
Yeah. But you watch that scene, and it's the classic, okay, nobody ever runs out of bullets, and also nobody ever hits a bad guy at once. Bullets flying everywhere. They do eventually, but
Tom
there's
Sizemore dies.
Al Pacino's just walking around loosey-goosey, as is Robert De Niro. The two of them should have been killed 1,000 times over in all the gunfire, but they're almost two completely different kinds of movie scenes.
Definitely. I didn't include Heat in my list because I was thinking heist meaning stuff. I know money is what they end up getting from this stuff, but they were literally stealing money in Heat. I'm talking more about the contents. I believe the ones I chose as options are things, usually diamonds, or the knock list about secret agents is what Mission Impossible is. And by the way, about Pacino, this is no longer in his resume on IMDb as an upcoming or pre-production or anything like that. But it used to be that he was going to remake this movie.
I
guess he'd be Tony. And I know I've seen it in there, but it must have been a long time ago because it's not there anymore. I don't know who would direct it. I'd be curious to see that.
I'd be curious to see anybody try and one-up this. Although I cannot praise this heist scene enough. And it's basically a whole act of the film, so it's really more than just a scene. And I mean, it's just a scene, but anyway. The beginning and the end, the first and the third act, they're fine. They're good.
You gotta lay the pipe about who these people are in the opening. And
it's interesting. It would definitely be a good movie if you took away the heist scene, but it wouldn't be on anybody's list of greatest films ever made.
No, that's true.
So that is something people could improve upon, I think, if they were to come back to this film. But what an intimidating thing. I always wonder why anybody bothers to remake a movie that nails something this completely, just gets it perfectly, and then someone's like, meh, I'm going to try it again.
For the same reason they stole the diamonds. Money.
Oh, yeah.
And prestige.
Money.
Sometimes remakes are better. I do think some of the American remakes of horror films from other countries have been pretty good, if not better. I know somebody who doesn't agree. I heard a podcast with her recently, but I think she's wrong. The whole sequence, it does build up as well with Tony and Joe studying the routine of other people on the street. So they know, oh, right now we got to stop, turn the lights out, don't make any noise. They weren't making noise anyway because somebody's coming by to do the thing in the store that's 2 doors over here, and the cop might patrol this time of day. So that would have been probably several days, maybe even weeks of them making sure what the routine was. Still, that would have been, in a lot of movies, what happens is that, oh my God, they didn't anticipate this. Somebody's walking their dog because they had indigestion and I got to walk around anyway, might as well take out Rover. Better call the cops, what's going on in Mappin and Webb.
And the cops do.
But that doesn't happen. Oh, yeah, the cops
car.
find the car, and then he has to knock them out and take the car away. So, yes, they almost do get busted.
Isn't it because they take too long? They say in the planning phase, we have to be out by, I think it's like 5:30 in the morning.
I think they were late, yeah.
They keep an eye on the clock. The scene keeps an eye on the clock. And it's just that the safe takes too long to crack. But they're already there. They're invested. What are you going to do? They just keep carrying on. That should have gotten them, or at least could have gotten them caught. Yeah. But it doesn't. They get away. It's not even the cops that catch them. The cops have no idea it's them. It's Grutter.
This is one of those movies where the cops are barely in it.
Yeah, they're not the antagonist at all. They give them the motive to lay low, although not enough of a motive for Cesar to keep his wits about him, and give the ring to a girl that he's known for like a week.
Who works in the nightclub where this guy is.
Yeah.
Now, he doesn't know. He wouldn't have known that that would be what the guy would do. Why would he think that Grutter would do that? But he is trouble. He's with the mob. maybe fall for somebody else who's not in his employ.
You're about to be very rich, too, so you could just take that money and buy something far less suspicious for this girl that you're crazy about. He's the dumbest. He seems like such a lovely guy. He's funny because he plays it very charming, and he plays it as a character that you really like. And maybe that's intentional because then it doesn't broadcast that he's going to be the problem, or maybe they don't really want to focus on everything would have been fine except for this one guy who's a villain because he's clumsy or careless. It's maybe a little more of like, well, we all know somebody that we like that's late to everything and the most likely to get an offender bender or whatever.
A genius at his job, but has bad judgment about one little thing, or one big thing, I guess, really. What did you think about the whole storyline, too, with why Tony says no to this job because he knows it's too dangerous, even with the plan they come up with? I don't know if he's thinking about that plan at that point. It's just been, let's smash and grab, in broad daylight even, I think is what is said by Mario. But then he wants in on the heist when he has the whole thing with Mado.
Well, it's a good question. He just did a long stretch in prison.
And he was with her before that.
Right.
But now she's taking the money.
He hated prison. He seems like a weathered man, and he plays it really well. His performance is great. They were all professional actors, but...
This is not a well-known cast even in France, though.
No, they couldn't get stars by any means, but he was probably the most experienced actor, but had basically been canned a bunch of times because he was a drunk. So maybe all that hard living on his face was from hard living, but he really plays it beautifully, this idea that he comes out of prison changed. He doesn't overdo it, but it's very apparent.
But him saying yes to the job...
So him saying yes to the job is a great question. He is risking going back to prison. So
it could be like that line in Heat where Sizemore says, the risk is worth the stretch, or whatever the hell he says.
And he also spent 5 years in prison talking to other burglars and thinking, just trying to devise the perfect burglary. You know, he got pinned on a burglary, so maybe he spent 5 years thinking about all the things he could have done differently, and that's what was in his head. They don't dig into it in the movie, but they do definitely let you know that he is an incredibly clever man serious and professional thief, but he's the most professional of the group.
By the way, the phrase must have been, or should have been, reward is worth the risk, is what I think Sizemore says at one point. The action is the juice, he says, too. And it also reminds me of that line in Blow, which is about drugs, I know, but Johnny Depp's character says he went into prison with the knowledge for selling pot and came out with a PhD in selling cocaine. So yes, maybe this criminal learned how to be a better criminal by other people telling him about things for a couple of years in prison and came up with this whole job. Because I guess one of the big things would be, what do you do about the debris falling down? Because it would make noise on the floor and you're busted. The umbrella thing is genius. I don't know who would have thought of that.
It's a genius touch in the movie, too, to not reveal that in the planning stage. They reveal how they're going to deal with the alarm, and we understand that they come up with all kinds of different plans to figure out how they're going to pull it off. But you see them with the umbrella, and you're like, what are they going to do with that? Oh, that's so smart.
Make sure you have a strong one. You don't want the stuff to rip right through it.
This is all procedurals, and in a way, this scene really is a procedural.
I love procedurals.
Just such a pleasure to watch competent people do something hard, really use their skills, but more to use their brains to come up with neat solutions to problems. Oh, it's just so delicious.
Some of the greatest movies in history are about bad guys doing stuff and often succeeding, but it's because we like to see competency, for one thing. Just having watched The Godfather again, almost everybody in the movie is a bad guy, other than maybe Diane Keaton's character. They're all culpable. And I guess she's culpable, too. She's married to the new mob boss for several years. He becomes the mob boss, and she's got his kids and everything. So she's culpable in some ways, too. But we love competency. And we love great performances in the films themselves, I guess, too. So that's part of it, even if somebody's playing an awful person.
And like you always say, you're always with whoever you're with.
Yes.
The movie's about them, so you're with them. Any good movie is going to make you root for somebody, even the worst possible person. Public Enemy, a great movie about a guy who's unquestionably awful. You never sympathize with him. You're never on his side exactly, but he's the star of the movie. The movie's about him, so you're just with him. And that's the same with any movie about a criminal.
So the woman that César gives the ring to is Viviane at L'Âge d'Or, which was a movie, by the way, a French movie back in the 20s, I think it was. The Golden Age, I believe is what that means, L'Âge d'Or. And she sings about Rififi. And I guess what that means is it's trouble or conflict. It doesn't really matter. It's one of those titles like Reservoir Dogs.
Rough and tumble. They say it in the song. It means a rough and tumble.
Okay.
But apparently there's not a really good translation for it.
Right. Well, I Googled it during the movie to see what it actually means. Maybe I wasn't looking at the screen when you saw that rough and tumble thing. But I found trouble, conflict, what have you. And that is the book title, too. So the guy who wrote the book, I think it's the Rififi, Chez l'Homme, whatever. The guy who wrote the book was Auguste Le Breton. He also had a hand in the screenplay. I don't think he wrote the book. There was no book, I guess, for Bob Le Flambeur, Jean-Pierre Melville did that movie. That's one we should maybe cover next year when it's 70 years old. So he helped write that script, and he helped write this one too, and he wrote the book, which apparently is really not about the heist. There's racist stuff in there. The bad guys, the main characters, I guess, are black, from Africa, maybe Algerian or something. I don't know. France, Algeria, what have you. And Dassin wanted no part of any of that stuff, so he made it about the heist and the aftermath of the heist way more than the book was.
Yeah, he was the director for hire. They wanted to make a movie of this book. He hated the book. Apparently, a lot of people hated the book. Almost every review I read where they had anything to say about the book was like, well, this is a great movie made from a terrible book. And the heist scene itself in the book only takes something like 8 or 10 pages. He made tons of changes to just accommodate what he wanted to do and made something incredible.
They all have big plans for the money except for Tony, which does make you wonder why he did it then too, because Joe obviously has a family with a kid and a wife. Mario's got his wife, Ida. They seem to be pretty happy together until they get killed pretty brutally. And then Cesar, I don't know about him so much. He doesn't have a whole lot of
Well, they bring him in because they need him, because they need a safe cracker.
No, but I mean his plans, I guess, are try to romance Vivian. But Tony doesn't really have any real plans, and he's the last one of them alive, and even he ends up dying too.
I can see how he would do it for Joe. There's so much love between them. Right away you see it. And he is Joe's son's godfather. He really loves that kid. You see him doting on the kid. I can see how he would just say, well, let's do this so that Joe has some scratch, so that he can start a life.
I think it was not common back in these days either to have, unless the movie was about this subject, a heroin character, a character who's on heroin. But Remy, Grutter, whatever his name is, brother, is addicted to heroin, and he's sicked on Tony. The whole thing is you go kill him and get this money, and he needs the horse, so he agrees to do it, and he's involved in all this too, so he ends up getting killed by Tony, I believe, doesn't he? That's a subtext that makes this more of a down and dirty type movie too.
It's the villains too. They certainly don't spend that much time trying to make real characters out of the Grutter family, and they're just mustache-twisting bad guys. Look at the kidnapping with Tonio. First of all, what a dirty move. Kidnap the guy's kid. And then it's Tony who says, they'll never return your kid, even if they get the cash. That's why he goes and he tries to take them out, because he knows they'll kill that little boy. Reprehensible, just pure evil.
Joe thinks, though, I have to take this chance, so here's all the money from the job. The fence came through pretty fast. I think it's supposed to be only about a day later when all this goes down.
Yeah,
it goes so bad.
It goes so smoothly.
Everything's perfect with the job, but then they're screwed, and I think it's a day.
The fence is the only person that really makes out well. He pays half price. They say the jewels are worth 250 million franc, and I think they get 120 million franc. So the fence got mint. He did wonderful compared to everybody else.
Can't rat him out because they're all
dead.
Although Mado is actually a help. She's a rat in a way, in a good way, because she's the one that tells Tony where she thinks Tonio is being held.
Yeah, it's true.
It's true.
She's a good rat. So maybe they're inconsistent. What do you make of the fact that the movie goes in the direction, this is film noir and this is the 50s, but it goes in the direction where all these guys who are likable, heroes of the film, they all end up dead for the crime of stealing some jewels. Some surely insured jewelry.
Good point, they're insured. Well, they are thieves, though.
Yeah, they're thieves. It's kind of the classic of the films of that era, but usually it's because of the code. The code forced all of these movies to make sure that people paid for their crimes, even if they were the heroes of the film.
But that didn't apply to French films.
And he's already escaped the Hollywood system. He can do whatever he wants.
Within reason, yes.
But he wants to or chooses to stick to that convention, which by 1955 was pretty tired, I would think. It's still an overused convention.
Maybe he wanted to stick with what he knew best, though, from Hollywood. I don't remember the ending of Brute Force or Naked City or Thieves Highway, Night in the City, but maybe the same thing happened. They probably did, because the code would have made sure that bad guys were punished.
The same ideals that made Hollywood do that are the ideals that carried over to France, too. So Pathé and the studio and the French audiences maybe wouldn't have tolerated it if Tony got away with money at the end.
Yeah, at the end, he is driving Tonio back. He picks him up at the drugstore. He'd left him there. You take care of this kid. Although, obviously, he's safer with this random stranger than he'd be walking the streets or wherever else, because Tony's got to get him back to his mother. He drives like a crazy man back to Paris, and he does make it back, but dies at the wheel. And Louise gets the kid, but the cops get the money. So I've got what happens next, by the way, for that. I think the cops quietly confiscate that suitcase full of money for their own use, and they get to live high in the hog. Do we really think all the evidence that's been collected from criminals over the years, drugs, weapons, guns,
money,
what have you,
cash,
has stayed in the evidence locker in all the evidence lockers in the world? Let's not be naive, like in Godfather.
Yeah.
Now who's being naive, Kay? And another thing you see in that sequence, too, it's not like it's gushing, but you see a fair amount of blood coming out of Tony's wound down to his feet, showing that he's got to get back. He'll barely make it. It's like in Prisoners. I covered that last year. Jake Gyllenhaal is shot and he's hurt, but he's not dying. But the girl needs to be seen to immediately. So it's just a matter of, let me get there. Whatever happens after that, whatever happens to me, doesn't matter. I got to get the kid to safety in both movies. And they do. But they're both bleeding quite a lot. So the cast here, I'm going to say this a lot for everybody, but here we go about the no other credits I recognize. I guess it's Jean Servais who plays Tony. He was in The Longest Day. That was in the 60s, a war film. But mostly made French films in the course of his 45 years of acting. And he's the best thing in this, I guess. Carl Monet, I think is what his name is. He plays, what is it, Joe? Yeah, he's the Suédois, so I guess he's Swedish. That's what it says here. Tony the Stéphanois, Joe the Suédois.
Interesting touch that other than Tony, who's French, the rest of them are not French.
Yeah, César would be... Isn't César a French name? Is
César's Italian. They say he's Italian like he barely speaks French.
Oh, and then Mario is too, because he's... Mario, yeah, okay, right. So the guy who plays Joe made a lot of other films in Europe and even directed a few times later on, but I didn't recognize very many credits. Robert Manuel, he mostly made French films. He is Mario. But also was in the 1984 Bill Murray version of The Razor's Edge. Dassin was in his own movies, Thieves Highway, Never on Sunday, and Top Copy. I don't know if he had big roles or not. Probably not as big as this, but he's in those. So he did act for his own self lots of times. Claude Sauvin, so it is Claude, like the male name, but that's Ida, Mario's wife. She was in a dozen or so other films, but nothing I recognized. Pierre Grasset, who's Grutter, whatever, was in his debut here. Only made about 8 movies, and I didn't recognize any of them. Robert Hossein plays Remy, his brother. He was generally in French films and had a small role in Once Upon a Time in the West. We do know that one, and we covered that one. Marie Sabaret plays Mado. Only made 9 or 10 other movies that I didn't recognize. And then Janine Darcy, who is Louise, Joe's wife, was in 50 or 60 other films, but I didn't recognize any of those titles because, generally speaking, it's French, or maybe it's Italian, I don't know. But titles I didn't know. They were not famous films. I mentioned Dassin's credits already, his Oscar nominations for Never on Sunday. He did start writing scripts with this one, but he hadn't written before. He has a writing credit on this. Also, Renee Wheeler, who translated Dassin's script into French.
Yeah, he wrote it in English.
And Dassin changed much of what Le Breton had written in his book. The producers were René Bézard, who worked on La Dolce Vita, Henri Berard, who worked on The Earrings of Madame D, which I believe I've seen. Have you ever seen that one?
Yeah.
And Pierre Cabot, who did a slew of French films. The film is 1:3 so we're still in that ratio, maybe because it was overseas. Hollywood was doing more widescreen movies, although not everything was. You still see 4:3 movies in the mid-50s and beyond, unless there's a big budget production. You just saw less of it. We watched our black and white Criterion DVD. I thought it looked pretty good. Cinematographer was Philippe Agostino. He mostly worked on French films and did nothing else that I could see with Dassin after this. And deliberately, they have a gray look to this. Dassin did not want blue skies, so sometimes they didn't shoot in a given day because it was nice out. And the producers were not happy about that because they had a small budget. The editor was Roger Dwyer, who also cut Never on Sunday and Top Copy. And the composer George Auric worked on 2 big movies in 1953, and we've covered them both, The Wages of Fear and Roman Holiday. Wages of Fear is another great one.
Another great French film. We saw this on Criterion, like you said, and it looked pretty good. And part of the reason when I said, how come I've never heard this movie before, is it never had a great home media release for many, many years. It was on VHS, it was available, but people said it looked terrible. Maybe that Criterion release will give it a boost. When we talk about the sight and sound list, you go, how come the public suddenly cares about Jean Dielmont? They'll go from nobody's seen it, nobody's talking about it, to its availability. As soon as something gets a Criterion release, some people will just watch everything they release. It certainly gives an old movie tons of attention. Is this on Sight and Sound?
I was just checking as you were talking there. And no, I checked before, but I want to make doubly sure I didn't miss something. No, it's not. Okay, then I guess we got a pretty short podcast here. Our third movie in Revenge Month. We didn't really talk about the revenge. This movie was listed that way. I wanted to cover it sometime this year. And then when I Googled revenge movies, I'm pretty sure I saw it in there. And then I thought I'd put it in this month. It fits, I guess, mostly because of the last act that Tony goes after these guys to get his godson back. So it's not really revenge the same way that Old Boy and Blood Simple so far have been this month. And some upcoming ones we have this month, or even more so. But still, it fits the theme well enough. We loved it. Your last thoughts on it?
It's a shame that the caper happens in the middle of the film because nothing that follows could possibly equal that. But even if the first and third act are just scaffolding for that marvel, totally worth it.
Yeah, it's the rare movie where the middle section is the best thing in the whole film. Well, it's cool and it's tough. It's one of those films that I knew was great before it was even half over the first time I saw it. Never mind seeing it now for the third. The heist is a true classic sequence. I love a good procedural, even if it's criminals stealing something that doesn't belong to them, because normally, of course, as I should be, we all should be pretty judgmental about that in regular life. It's not yours. Why are you stealing? You gotta love the teamwork. Everybody's got a role. Joe is more the brute force guy. He's the one they basically lay the safe onto. He's so big and strong that he can take the weight of that till they can bounce it on something else so they can drill into the back of it. They don't show that during the chalkboard scene, if you will, either.
Yeah, another one of those details.
Not the umbrella. They don't really show him chiseling, because why would you show that? But he's the one that does most of the chiseling, and then he's the one that has to put the safe on his back. But everybody's got a role. There's no wasted motion, and of course they do it all without talking. What a classic sequence. One of the greatest sequences in any movie ever, I think. If you had to list those, some of the great movies in every country. Well, that was how we saw Rififi. What's next for this podcast? Well, Revenge Month continues on Friday, when I'll be covering big-time revenge, Spielberg's Munich. Then I'll be talking about Inarritu's The Revenant next Monday. Another one, obviously, is about revenge. Bev is taking that day off. You did this last year, where most of the year, well, maybe about half the year, you took one Monday off a month. When Bev returns on Monday the 28th, though, we'll be talking about some lady vengeance. Not the Park Chan-wook movie, but we'll find out just how creative the payback can be when Jane Fonda, Lily Tomlin, and Dolly Parton set their sights on the bad boss Dabney Coleman in 9 to 5. So the coming attractions trivia question is, Jane Fonda has had one of the greatest careers of anyone in the past 50 years, but she stopped acting for 15 years. She was 15 years on the sidelines. From 1990 to 2005, not one film in that entire time. Her co-star in the 1990 movie was the legendary Robert De Niro, and the movie was Stanley and Iris. So who was her famous co-star in the comeback movie 15 years later in 2005?
So for the answer to that question, tune in 2 weeks for 9 to 5. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to favorite or subscribe. There are hundreds of episodes available for you to check out.
658.
That's right. So if you like us, check those out. We were sure to have covered a lot of movies that you love. And if you like them and you'd like to support the podcast, the best way you can do that is by leaving us a rating and a review. Another way to support us, and a great small Canadian business that we genuinely use and love, is by going to sparkplug.coffee/HYES for freshly roasted premium coffee delivered straight to you. And that HYES will get you a 20% discount. You can also find us on YouTube. Our channel is at HYES Ellis. And we'd love to hear from you guys. There's a few ways to reach us, starting with Twitter. I'm at Bev Ellis, and Ryan is at MovieFiend51. We're also on Blue Sky. My name on Blue Sky is Bev Ellis, and Ryan is Ryan-Ellis. And our email address is haveyoueverseenpodcast@gmail.com.
Let's go rob a jewelry store. I'm sure we'll get away with it.
Yeah. And cut. This will be our last podcast. We'll be in jail.
Well, no, we work ahead, so we'll have a couple more.
Okay.
But I can't post them, so
right.
We'll just go off into the ether. Au revoir.